They called him slow of speech, unfit to lead. But when fire met bush on sacred ground, God called the unqualified to break chains with nothing but his word. Moses stood before the throne of Pharaoh, a trembling shepherd before the God of Egypt. And with no army, no weapon, he whispered the words that shook a nation. "Let my people go." Plagues rained down, blood, darkness, death. Still Pharaoh's heart stayed hard. Still Moses returned, again and again, not for fame, not for vengeance, but because slaves cried in the night, and God was not deaf. Then came the night of escape. The sea raged ahead, armies thundered behind. But Moses lifted his staff, and the waters split. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was a miracle walking on dry ground. In a world of empires, Moses proved that one voice, obedient to God, can bring a kingdom to its knees. He was worshipped as a god, crowned in gold, seated on thrones built by broken backs. To him, slaves were tools, their pain invisible, their God laughable. So when Moses stood before him, dusty and trembling, Pharaoh laughed. "Let your people go? Who is this God of yours?" Then the river bled, the sky turned black. Frogs, flies, boils, death. A nation groaned, but Pharaoh's heart grew colder. He saw a world unravel. Children cry, crops rot. Still he held the whip tighter. Still he refused, until the final night. A silence fell, then a scream. Egypt's firstborn, gone. Only then did Pharaoh break. "Go," he whispered. "Take your people and go." But pride dies slow. Rage rose like fire in his veins. He gathered chariots, swords, horses, and thundered toward the fleeing slaves. Then he saw it. The sea opened, walls of water holding back judgment. He charged in, but the hand of God was already closing. The waves returned. The empire drowned. Pharaoh's story is not just about power. It is a warning that pride will always drag us to the depths. When we refuse to bow to truth, they took everything from him, his home, his name, his language, but they couldn't take his God. Daniel rose in Babylon, not by sword, not by compromise, but by wisdom, by integrity. He served kings, but bowed only to one. Then came the law. Pray to no God but the king, or face the lions. The city held its breath. Would he stay silent? But Daniel opened his window, and as the sun poured in, he knelt. He prayed, louder than fear, louder than the law, louder than death. They dragged him through the streets. They threw him into the pit. The lions circled, but did not bite. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He simply trusted. And when morning came, the king rushed to the den and called out, "Daniel, has your God saved you?" And from the darkness came a voice. He shut the lions' mouths. Daniel walked out untouched, because faith doesn't always remove the danger. Sometimes it walks right through it and survives. In a kingdom that worshipped fear, Daniel's prayer was the loudest roar of all. The music played, the crowd bowed, but three young men stood alone. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They weren't soldiers. They weren't prophets, just faithful men. In a kingdom built on fear, the king's statue towered above them, golden and lifeless, but backed by fire. Bow, they were told, or burn. They answered without trembling, "Our God is able to save us. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow." Even if he doesn't, those words shook heaven. So they were bound, hands tied, feet chained, thrown into a furnace, 7 times hotter. The fire should have killed them instantly, but it didn't, because in the flames, A fourth figure appeared. Not a soldier, not the king, but someone divine. They walked in the fire, unburned, unbroken, unafraid. The king rose to his feet. "Did we not throw in 3?" he asked. "But I see 4. And the fourth looks like the Son of God." They walked out, not even the smell of smoke on their clothes. In that moment, an empire bowed to faith, because fire doesn't destroy what God stands in. It reveals who never burned to begin with. She wore a crown, but carried a secret. Esther was queen, but she was also a Jew. One whisper of her bloodline, and she'd be gone. Then came the decree. All Jews must die. A death sentence sealed by royal law. She could stay silent. She could hide. But her uncle's words pierced her soul. "Perhaps you were born for such a time as this." So she fasted, prayed, and trembled as she stepped into the king's court, uninvited. One law: if he didn't lift his scepter, she would die. Silence. A heartbeat. Then mercy. He raised it. And in that moment, a hidden warrior rose. She exposed the plot, unmasked the enemy, and turned the king's heart. The Jews were saved. The tables turned. And the gallows built for her people were used for their enemies instead. Esther never led an army. She never held a sword. But with faith and courage, she altered the fate of a nation. Because bravery doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it enters quietly. These stories are not just ancient. They are alive. Moses, Daniel, Esther, they were not superheroes. They were human, scared, trembling, unsure, but they chose faith. And now, it's your turn, because the empires still rise, the fires still burn, the lions still circle, and the silence of the oppressed still cries out. You may not stand before Pharaoh, but you face injustice. You may not kneel in Babylon, but you're told to stay quiet. You may not wear a crown, but your voice could save someone. Your faith, your stand, your refusal to bow to fear, to hate, to silence. Perhaps you were born for such a time as this. So speak when the world demands silence. Stand when others bow. Pray when the laws forbid it. And walk through fire, knowing you are not alone. Because the revolution was never just about the past. It's about now. It's about every heart that still believes that God is greater than empire.